Welcome. Last week, we impacted the Valley through thousands of neighborhood Halloween events. Fun-filled opportunities on driveways, in cul-de-sacs, on streets, and in the parks. We intentionally met our neighbors and continued to build our friendships in a fun way so that we can serve others and earn the right to share Christ. Exceptional job, everyone. Thank you for such a great job. Now that Halloween is behind us, we start thinking about Thanksgiving and Christmas, the time of year that we express our gratitude and we give generously to others, especially those in need. 1 in 4 Arizona kids are living in poverty. Over 600,000 kids get breakfast and lunch at school every day. But what happens when school is out for the 2 weeks for Christmas break? Well, these families have to make some very tough decisions. And that's why CCV launched the Family to Family Project last year, providing food to over 4,000 families. Not just a Christmas meal, but food for the entire 2 weeks of the Christmas break. This year, we are going to bless even more families in need. Our goal is over 10,000 boxes of food for over 5,000 families in over 100 schools that are nearest our campuses in Peoria, Surprise, Scottsdale, our new East Valley campus, and even the Avondale area where we hope to launch next fall. This is a huge opportunity to get your neighbors to help you, to go door to door collecting the items, and make sure you tell them what it's for. Make it an outreach and an opportunity. Give everyone in your neighborhood a list of what you need and collect it all in one day. Make it a family event. What a great way to get to know your neighbors and include the whole family. So start planning now how you, your family, and your neighborhood will participate in this incredible act of generosity to show the love of Christ, expecting nothing in return. And now let's continue this great adventure through the book of James.
Welcome back to the third week of our study of the book of James. We're going to talk about a really important topic today. But let me introduce it this way. You probably can't tell just by looking at me, but I've spent my fair share of time in the gym. And so I'm around all these gym rats, and one of the things I noticed is some of the guys, what's the polite way to say it? They're lopsided. Like their chest is huge, but you look down to their calves and they get these like little bitty calves because they're only working their upper body and not their lower body. So I've been kind of thinking about that. You know what the hardest muscle is to develop? It's almost impossible for most of us to control this muscle. Here's a clue. It is actually pound per pound the strongest muscle of your body. That's right, it's your tongue. If I were to give a title to James chapter 3, it would be this: keep an eye on your tongue. I think all of us have had these situations where our tongue kind of got us in trouble because we didn't control it. So let's start with this icebreaker question. In what situations do you most often lose control of your tongue? Maybe you have trouble when you're out in your workshop, or maybe you have trouble in a locker room, or in a kitchen, or on I-17. Share. I found a discrepancy in my Bible. The title of chapter 3 of James says, Taming the Tongue. And so you assume James is going to tell you how to tame your tongue. But you get down to the middle of the chapter, kind of the key verse, verse 8, no human being can tame the tongue. So wait a second, how am I supposed to tame my tongue if no human being can tame the tongue? I'm scratching my head on this, trying to figure it out, and I noticed verse 7. All kinds of animals, birds and reptiles and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. What struck me is that we're not talking about taming your own tongue. We're talking about taming someone else's tongue. A human being can tame all kinds of different animals, a horse, a dog, a cat. What? No, you can't tame a cat. But you can tame all kinds of different animals. But you can't tame other people's tongues. I'm not talking about your own tongue, theirs. So, big deal. What's the point? Here's the point. When I have most difficulty taming my own tongue is when someone else hasn't tamed theirs. They say something, so I say something. They spread some gossip, so I spread some gossip. And here's kind of a principle of taming the tongue. If you don't get this, you're probably not going to be successful in controlling your own tongue. Here it is. When others are at their worst, you have to be at your best. It is in those times when someone lashes out at you or stabs you in the back that you will find it most difficult to tame your own tongue. But you not only can tame your own tongue, you must tame your own tongue. So here's the first question for discussion. Share a time when someone's comment positively altered the course of your life. It could have been a coach, it could have been a parent, it could have been a teacher, but someone whose words were wise and you took it to heart and it made a big difference for how you lived. James is going to give us 3 bits of advice about controlling our tongues. So I want to introduce what James says and then give you 3 questions to ask so that you will know, am I or am I not in control of my own tongue? Here's the first thing he says, verses 3 through 6. He compares the human tongue to 3 items, to a bit in a horse's mouth, a rudder on a ship, and a spark that starts a forest fire. Because we know about the spark. I mean, you remember the Yarnell fire last summer where one lightning strike caused all of that damage. The tongue is like that. Just one little strike can just wreak havoc in people's lives. But the tongue is also, in a positive way, like a bit in a horse's mouth. Well, most of us don't ride horses a lot, but there's one person right now who is controlling the whole room. Is the person with the remote control. That little remote control, man, you can turn it on, turn it off, you press play, press pause. The tongue is kind of like that. It is that which controls your family and controls your destiny. It is also like a rudder of a ship. Rudder, we don't really ride on a lot of ships, but most of us drive. And the person who sits behind the steering wheel, everyone else in the car is going to go wherever they go because they've got the steering wheel. I think that's why guys like to drive so much. We like to be in control of our destinies to determine where we go. If you like to be in control of your destiny, then you must take control of that difficult muscle to develop of your tongue. And though it is difficult to tame the tongue, it is possible. I want to share with you, I'm not proud of this, but when I was in the 8th grade, I remember it well. I had a pretty foul mouth. Probably not all that surprising. I'm a kid, latchkey kid growing up and hanging around with these little hooligans on the street. And I thought it was cool, to use some adult vocabulary. But I got struck by the Holy Spirit, said that I don't want you talking like that. And I believed it. So I did this little experiment. It took 1 week to tame my tongue from cursing. All I did was, I took a Sharpie, and my thumb was Monday, this finger was Tuesday, to go through the week. And every time that I used foul language, I just made a mark on my finger. My friends started asking me, because the first day went down to my wrist. They were asking me, what are you doing? And I would just confess to them, I'm a Christian, and I don't want to talk like that anymore. That's what I'm doing. By the time I got to Friday, there were just a couple of marks. And in 1 week, I found I could control my tongue. But here's what happened psychologically. On the first day, I would say something, 5 minutes later, realize I said that. That would mark my hand. And then on Wednesday, I would hear the words coming out my mouth, and it was like, you want to stop and come back. But I couldn't, and they were already out there. So by Friday, I was actually hearing the words in my brain before they came out of my mouth. And I would hear them early enough that I could actually stop words that I didn't want to come out my mouth. And here's the question that I had to ask of myself. And if you practice this, you can practice asking the question before you speak the words. It's a simple question: is this helpful? And if it's not helpful, don't say it, because there are a lot of words that can tear your family and friends apart. So to develop this a little further, why don't you discuss in your group, what are some methods that have helped you or your family tame the tongue? I've shared with you one of my stories. You share yours. So the first question we need to ask is this helpful? If not, don't let it come out of your mouth. The second question is this me? Take a look at James chapter 3, verse 9. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come both praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. James goes on to give an illustration. If you have a saltwater pool, you're not going to get fresh water out of it. If you have a freshwater pool, you're not going to get salt water out of it. If you have a fig tree, you're not going to get grapes. If you have a grapevine, you're not going to get figs. That's James' illustration. Let me take you back to an illustration that James' half-brother gave. His name is Jesus. Mark chapter 7. There was this time he was eating in this house, and his disciples had not washed their hands. And the religious leaders kind of flipped out over that, not because of germs, but because of, well, spiritual cooties. You have to wash other people's uncleanness off of you. And Jesus said that's nonsense. And Jesus didn't wash his hands, and they got on him about it. And he went into this, not really a tirade, but he was pretty stern. He said, look, it's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you. It's what comes out of your mouth that defiles you. You are defined. I know people will say you are what you eat, and that's true in the physiological sense, but in the spiritual sense, you're not what you eat. You are what you say. And so if you say, oh, I love God, but you don't love his children, then something's wrong. Either your love for God or your love for his children, something is wrong. If you say, oh, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, but your words are full of cursing and bitterness, of selfishness and arrogance, something is wrong, either with your confession or with your tongue. You can't be two different people. Your mouth is the window to your soul. So this is going to be a tough question, but could we just be real and honest with each other for a minute? Could you share a time that you said something that you really wish you could take back? It might have been in a friendship when you were a kid. It could have been as a parent, you lost your temper with a child. It might be something at work that cost you dearly. Or perhaps you'd be brave enough to share this, a time when a single statement caused great damage, either from you or to you. It's a tough question. Appreciate you being honest. Third question, is it wise? If we're to control our tongues, James gives us great advice to ask these three questions before we speak. Is it helpful? Is it me? Is it wise? Verses 13 through 18 is the section on godly wisdom. And I want to focus in on two verses. Verse 14, if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Verse 18, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. There's two different kinds of people that James describes. There's a kind of person that has something in his heart that leads to quarrels. They like to fight. They create dissension. They just like walk in the room and there's another kind of person. They walk in the room and there's a calmness that follows them into the room. They're called peacemakers. And the difference between the two is wisdom. Do you have the wisdom of God in your life to control your tongue and bring peace to where you go? So that leads to our final discussion question. Who can you intentionally encourage with your words? What steps will you take, and who will you contact to repair the damage caused by the words you've spoken? Maybe if you have been that wisdomless man or woman that's caused a fracture in an important relationship, that you would just have the courage to go to them and say, I'm sorry. Let's reconcile this relationship. What steps will you take? And who will you contact to repair the damage caused by the words you've spoken? On the other hand, some of you have been wise. And you have practiced this art of encouragement that brings peace in people's lives. So I want to ask you, who can you intentionally encourage with your words to become a peacemaker that brings the peace of God through the wisdom of God? Man, the tongue is the hardest muscle in the body to work out. But with these questions that James offers, we really can be a people who controls our tongues. We want to ask you to discuss these questions, and then when you're finished, we'd like the men to break away with men and women break away with women for a time of prayer to encourage each other with the wisdom of God.